morning, everybody. Today I decided to get on my face as usual and spend a little time just talking to the Father. And He tells me to get up, get dressed, and meet Him on the front porch. And if you know anything about me, the front porch is where I used to go to spend my time with the Father. The front porch was actually where the whole video idea started. So I went to the front porch and I sat with Him for just a few minutes, and He only said one thing to me. He said, "Don't forget who you are. Don't forget what you were called to." And I'm reminded of the fact that yesterday I had the opportunity to minister to an office mate. I've had the opportunity since I've had this job to get to minister to people who don't normally get ministered to, especially at work. But it was more than that. There's other things that He brought to mind that reminded me of who I am and who I'm called to be. And that's one thing that I think we get mixed up, and that's why we get caught up in sin, is because we forget who we are called to be. We lose our identity at times. We let our current circumstances or things that we're going through define who we are. And I think that's one of our biggest mistakes, is that we let others define us, or we let situations define us. We even let our jobs define us. You know, the United States is one of the very few countries in the world where people's identities are typically based on what they do for a living. But what if you have a greater identity than that? Because I believe we do. And I believe that if we have that identity, we have a calling from Christ, then we should assume that identity. We should start living in that identity. And it's not always easy, right? The world likes to pull us into places where we live in opposition to that identity sometimes. We forget who we are. We forget what we're called to. And because of that, we're convinced that it's okay for us to get sucked into doing things that will harm us. We'll get sucked into doing things that will cause harm to our families and our lives. And that's one of the things that He reminded me of today, is don't forget who you are supposed to be. And don't let everything happening in the world turn you from being a loving father, a husband who cherishes his wife, a person who helps minister people who are adopting children, or ministering to people who have children and are trying to raise children. These things that I'm called to be, and some of them are tougher than that. Some of them I'm not even going to mention, as much as I'm just going to say He reminded me of who I'm called to be. And so I would ask you, do you remember who you are and what you're called to be? Do you know what you are? Do you know who you are and what your definition truly is, what your identity truly is? That's what God gave me today, guys. Love y'all. God bless.